Nigel Wright did not make the Duffy scandal go away today. He did say that he never told the Prime Minister about that $90,000 check he wrote for Duffy's expenses. The trouble is, he also laid out the frantic efforts of the Prime Minister's staff to protect Duffy and to make sure he didn't pay a dime himself.
I just think we have to respect the fact that the answer should be given inside the courthouse.
The testimony of Harper's former chief of staff, smack in the middle of an election, was always going to be risky business for the government.
Mr. Duffy, how are you feeling?
The Mike Duffy scandal is a toxic brew of money and backroom deals, beginning with Duffy claiming travel expenses for living in his own home, and ending with that huge check from Nigel Wright to cover those claims. Wright testified that he thought Duffy was arguably justified in making the claims, but he said he thought they were only $32,000 and arranged for the Conservative Party to pay to make the controversy go away. He confirmed with Senator Irving Gerstein, head of the Conservative Fund, that the party was open to paying Duffy's legal fees and expenses since it was clear they were innocently claimed. But Duffy insisted he'd done no wrong and that admitting a mistake would be a slippery slope. Wright says he told Duffy that attitude wasn't going to end well and agreed to keep Duffy out of a Senate audit if he agreed to repay the money. Wright then said he asked the Prime Minister to approve media lines to explain all this to the public and to approve the precedent of pushing people to make repayments that they didn't owe. That, Wright said, was all he meant by that infamous email saying, "We are good to go" from the PM. A campaigning Harper stuck to his story too.
Mr. Wright was working with Mr. Duffy to make sure he did repay them, and that's what we were told was going to happen. When I found out that is not what happened, that in fact they'd been repaid by somebody else, we made that information public.
In fact, Harper did not make that public until it was already in the news, and the opposition leader said that's not all he's got wrong.
I asked Mr. Harper in the House of Commons, good to go with what? And he said, good to go with Mike Duffy paying his own expenses. That doesn't add up.
What is becoming increasingly clear is that Conservatives, the Conservative government, has not been telling the truth to Canadians.
At the time, though, Wright claims that he was in a jam. He'd agreed that the party would pay Duffy's expenses, but the party backed out when the amount changed from $32,000 to $90,000. So Wright, a wealthy man, paid it himself, saying, "I had an obligation to fulfill my end of the arrangement with Duffy. I couldn't think of another way of doing it." Tomorrow, though, Duffy's lawyer, Donald Bain, will cross-examine Wright on all of that.
You know what to expect from Mr. Bain?
I do not.
Now, it's likely, of course, that the cross-examination will focus on Wright's view that Duffy may indeed have been unfairly thrown under the bus to make the scandal go away, Peter.
Well, Terry, we heard from Nigel Wright today, but we also got that pile of emails that was entered in evidence. What do those tell us?
Well, it is hundreds of pages, and it's rich pickings for the defense because it shows in detail how all the key people around Harper were working night and day to protect Duffy. The problem being that the Prime Minister's story now is that Duffy's a bad guy, but his story back then was that Duffy was a good guy, doing great work for the party, bogus expenses or not, Peter.
All right, Terry, thanks very much. Terry Malefsky in Ottawa.